All right. Well, Chuck, welcome to week 2, technically week 3 of the internship.
Thank you very much.
How you doing?
I'm doing great.
We're down to one mic because I kind of dropped mine yesterday, and I got to fix it a little bit. I was cleaning, and it hit off my hat and dropped, and it was giving weird feedback volume. So I'm going to try and fix that and then see where we go. But we got presentation number 2 for you. What are we going over today?
Yeah, so I want to talk about how I discovered last week very interesting thing about the load and how I think less is more in terms of load and not forcing yourself into positions to be more explosive. And I feel like this applies to, I'm a baseball player, so I will relate this to the throw a little bit, but it stemmed from me experimenting with jumps, vertical jumps. So yeah, that's what I'm talking about today.
Cool. Before we get there, let's more importantly cover, you went to your first concert in Minnesota. How was that?
It was awesome. It was actually unbelievable. Jacob Collier, highly recommend.
Yeah, I've never
highly
heard of him.
recommend to anybody. Absolute musical genius. The display of artistry was very, very impressive. He was playing every single instrument. The band was good. Good vibes, man. It was cool.
Speaking of musical genius, there's a rumor going around that you were on The Voice. Confirm or deny?
I can confirm that rumor. Yeah, it is true. I was. It was The Voice Kids in Canada.
Wait, really? The kids?
Yeah, I was.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I was like the oldest I could be to be on the kids. That's what kind of convinced me to go. I was like, oh, I'll kind of,
Dunk on some balls. And confirm or deny, you got a EP out on Spotify.
Yeah, I do. Charles Bernard, Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube.
Plug.
Check it out.
Plug. Fuck yeah. All right, let's get into Rob Gray's work. What do we got today?
Yeah,
You're talking about the load first
Yeah.
off. So load, you're talking about load as in pitching.
Yeah, so like the load
Explain
in
the
your
load.
hips, it's more the load from your hips, kind of the hinge type stuff to create power or generate, jump high or throw fast. And basically what I was doing is we were jumping over the hurdles here, and I was really good at this. I could jump as high as Prince, which he jumps like 37 on the mat. And then I would go over to the mat, and I would jump 29, 30. And I was like, well, maybe he's still a couple inches higher than me, but I feel like this is too much of a gap. And I felt super slow over there. And
Is that for an approach or a standing?
an approach.
Yep.
And so I was thinking, and when I'm dunking, I'm doing the same thing as what I was jumping over there. I was like, I'm super quick with the ground. Like I just approach, boom. I don't try to load. I'm almost just like running, and then as soon as my feet touch the ground, I jump, and I jump higher than I could, like any other way. And then when I would go there, I would try to like get down and then go up. Like I would force myself into a deeper load, and I think that was slowing me down. So then I was like, hold on, let me try to just be super fast and reactive and like not try at all to get deep. And then I jumped 33.5 on my last jump of my last set. So that was like, holy shit, after I don't remember what we were doing, Zerchers or something, 3 plates. So I was like, okay, this is like gonna transfer to like a 34, 35. So this is great, this is like 5 more. And I was like, okay, but how does that apply to like throwing now? Does that mean like, I don't want to pull myself too deep in my back hip, because when you're pitching, you're loading right on that back side, and basically you want to hold tension in that back side for as long as you can until you can rotate your hips, and then that separates your hips from your upper half, and then you use that separation is what creates that kind of slingshot movement that allows you to throw hard. So I was like, okay, well, if I'm not trying to get deep there to jump as high as I can, it's going to be the same principle. Like explosion is explosion. So I experimented with that, and it's night and day in terms of how much smoother it is. And it explains too why I feel so much better throwing in like athletic motion. Like often as pitchers, we tend to be stable and like throw as a pitcher. And you kind of get into so much mechanical thoughts, and you get into your head, as opposed to like, okay, let's catch ground balls and like field and throw to first base. Like infielders don't really think, because it's a motion, they're flowing through it, and then as a result, they don't think about getting deep. And then some guys have a cannon and they don't even like know why. But basically, it's just that they let their athleticism take over, and that's kind of what I was getting to. And yeah, so the whole principle is to not force yourself into positions and just kind of let your body do its thing.
Nice. And now I like that you said don't force it into positions, because it's not that load is bad or unloading is good.
Yeah.
It's what works for you. Because it's the same as jumps. You'll see guys like myself, I'm a deep tier jumper. Like I will get into a deep squats. I will use the quads. And it sounds like guys like yourself, especially Prince. Prince is a very elastic jumper. He doesn't squat down very deep. It's very like Achilles based, springy based. He's very good at plyometrics and using velocity. That's what Joel Smith talks about, like using the velocity up in a jump or using strength into the jump. It's a strength based jumper. But same could be, I'm sure, applied to throwing as well. If you have a longer, slower throw that can produce a lot of force versus a quicker, snappier throw that's also producing a lot of velocity, a lot of force through the ball. It's just how do you get there and not forcing the athletes through one pathway or the other.
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, it's you're going to find a medium. Like you're going to find a happy medium between both. But I feel like people that force positions, myself a little bit, like I would try to get deep. And I'm like, I would get into so much range. And then now I slow the video down and I look at myself, like I still get in some decent range when I'm throwing, but I'm never thinking about it. So that allows me to like stay. You don't want to block tension. So I feel like what that happens is like it's all like a kinetic chain. Like you want to transfer energy from the ground to the tip of your fingers when you're throwing a baseball. But if you're contracting somewhere or you're stalling in a certain position for a little bit, the energy doesn't flow there, and then it's like it resets the whole thing. So that it kind of breaks the chain, and that's what creates more injuries because like you have to generate force from somewhere else, so you have to compensate, and that's what makes you not throw as hard as you would like. So
How do we fix that?
yeah, so now I got into Rob Gray's work and the cues, and I thought it was really interesting and how external cues are usually more efficient than internal cues. So a lot of, and also a lot of drills that you could give. So I like how I've been implementing the catcher's drills, how like throwing from a crouch to a catcher throw, and that helped me just self-organize. So that's the kind of drill that you can prescribe to somebody that's trying too hard with their backside, because now they're kind of coming out of it from a deeper position, and then they'll naturally kind of stop at the depth of back leg, if that makes sense. That's optimal for their throw. And yeah, obviously it's going to be individual cases, but really thinking about what external cue you could give to somebody. So I like, for me, I was thinking about throwing a punch. So that was kind of another movement. So it's still kind of internal, but not simply related to like bring your hand here. It's more like a different motion that I'm thinking about. So that was helpful. So this is all in that way of thinking. You're trying to give some external cues and give some drills that will take care of it by itself. You don't want to tell the athlete like don't squat down. So maybe just keeping the hips forward helps me. So find a way to do that. Tell them to just point your belly button towards that way as long as you can or something.
So when you work with an athlete, what would be your balance between internal, external, and like constraint-based cues? Or I guess constraint's not a cue, but constraint-based drills versus internal and external cues. Like what's kind of your setup or balance of that with an athlete that you're working with?
Well, I like to explain to them what we're trying to accomplish, but then I will give a cue that's most likely more external or that allows thinking to not be involved. With younger athletes, I will not do that. So usually I won't explain what we're trying to do with younger kids because I don't want to, like if you're 10 and you don't know anything about mechanics, I don't see the point of like saying, hey, we want to separate our hips and our shoulders and create that. And like, if I can get you to do that without explaining it to you, I think that's best.
How do you go about that?
So yeah, so that would be like given a drill or something. The constraint, sometimes I will use the constraint a lot. Like I will just be like, okay, you're just gonna start throwing with your feet forward. So you'll have to close your shoulders. So then you understand that principle of hip-shoulder separation. So that's more of a constraint one. But sometimes I'll be like a guy that extends their arm too much. I would maybe, do a connection ball. That's another constraint one. And then external cues in baseball, I feel like they're harder. So they make you work a little bit more. I don't have that many examples here, but I would just try to find. Sometimes I give the analogy of the car sales dealership recently, like the big thing inflatable, to kind of how to go about stiffness and like being loose. So that's something that I would give, and like people that muscle up a lot. So that's more of an external cue again. that allows them to kind of, okay, don't tell them be loose, but tell them to be like something else, like
Yep.
noodle arms or something.
Yeah, I like that. And one of the things cool that you're kind of getting to too, it's like when you work with those constraints, one of the things that is nice with it is like you can constrain without telling them the point of the constraint. Like just have them do the drill, whatever it's the split stance drill, the catcher drill. Like you're trying to get them to do something, right? I think that's one of like the biggest misunderstandings with most people, like with the differential learning approach to the constraint-led model, is they think you're just throwing shit at the wall. And sometimes you're giving a high variety of stuff to see what works with the athletes. But many times you have a specific goal in mind. Like you were saying, you're trying to get them to open up their shoulders. If you constrain their legs where they're standing, it'll get them to open up that shoulder. So you give them the movement task to get the movement option that you're trying to go for. And on a back end, what you can do, instead of just cueing them in the moment, is back end, you just have that conversation. It's like, okay, what did you feel there? Oh, I felt my shoulder open. You're like, yes, that's exactly the goal that we are going for there. And then you can kind of build out those things. But I think a lot of coaches preemptively do too much. They do too much on the front end and probably not enough on the back end. And I think the constraint-led model allows you to let the athletes self-organize into what they're doing, see how they're reacting to the drill, or even just pitching. It doesn't even have to be a drill, but just let them pitch, see how it is, and then we can drill on the back end, see how it's working, then bring them back to the sport and kind of balance it back and forth there, rather than, I think just a lot of coaches have these like set practice plans, set drills that we have for the day, without just looking at where that athlete is that day. Like maybe, and I see this all the time in my own swing. It's like I have certain days I'm struggling with certain things. Some days it's my hips, some days it's my hands, some days it's a shoulder dip. And if I just had, okay, like I'm going to work on my shoulder dip today, it's like, well, I'm not struggling with my shoulder hip dip today. Like that's not the issue that I need to work on.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that and also I feel like a lot of issues between athletes are similar, so you can kind of put them together to work on similar things. Most of the time, like the 10 toes drill works well for guys that their arm is kind of
What drill?
not great. It's called a 10 toes. It's just like hips facing forward and then you throw.
Okay.
And that's a one I use to clean up my arm, and like it's a great drill, and it's great for separation and understanding how it works. But that's a drill that will work for a lot of guys. So like knowing what kind of guys need that, and then knowing you don't need to know like 27,000 drills. Like you can have 5 drills that will work for a bunch of different guys, and then 5 other drills for all these other guys. And like ultimately you kind of get to a similar result, but it's to have the ability to decipher what drill initially they need, or what constraint you need to put them through so that they get to where they could be, and not just, like you said, say, okay, we're going to do kneeling throws today.
Yep.
Half of them,
They don't need it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Or they have that drill perfection. That's a really good point where you're talking about how, again, I think sometimes the constraint-led model is looked at as like the lazy way of coaching. It's like it could not be the more opposite. Like the lazy way of coaching is having these drills we're doing today and planning everything out perfect, because then you don't have to do anything coaching-wise when you're in the moment. Like you're just like, we're doing this drill, then we're doing this drill, then we're doing this drill. Maybe I throw a cue or two at you while you're doing it. But the constraint-led model, when you're coaching that way, it's like, oh, you don't need this drill. I need to come up with a drill that you have. And like you said, usually if you are a good enough constraint-based coach, you have enough drills underneath your pocket, you just have a drill that you can try next for that athlete. You're seeing the same, like you said, seeing the same issues we can. I think wickets are a good example for an athlete that doesn't have the stride length that you want, right, or the frequency that you want, and you can expand or shorten the wickets and being able to base off that. That'd be a good example for speed-wise. But I think it makes the session much more on the spot and much more live for the coach in the moment. It's like, oh, fuck, I'm seeing this like kneeling drill that he's doing, or whatever it is for the day, and it's like he doesn't need that today. It's not what he's struggling with today. He already has that mastery today. Now on the spot, I need to come up with something new, rather than, okay, we're just going to whatever we have next programmed.
Yeah, exactly. But also sometimes focusing too much on an issue, might not be the solution. So like knowing that comes with experience too. But I feel like, let's say lower half is often something that's lacking in like the throw, and it's often regarded as the thing you need to fix first, but sometimes overemphasizing that will just lead to more self-consciousness and less freedom in the movement. So I feel like, my lower half wasn't very good, and then I got away from training lower half, but I got better at a bunch of different things, and then I get back to doing throws like normal, and suddenly lower half's better. So that's also a component that you need to include and be like, okay, well, yeah, there's something, it's not necessarily, teaching the lower half doesn't necessarily come from putting emphasis on it. And that's another part that's tricky about coaching, especially baseball, because it's so mental and you want to get out of that. So that's why sometimes you have to get away and be like, okay, today we're just going to throw like a shortstop. We're going to be an athlete. So then you kind of get into a more like athletic, disposition, and then you're like, okay, like now I understand how to organize my body better, and then we might, talk about the lower half or afterwards, like, hey, that was so much better. You used that better. See what I mean? And then you're like, oh yeah, that's so true.
Well, and I think that's a good point too. It's like the emphasis, when you do emphasize, those are internal, external cues, whether you realize it or not. You can have a constraint, you can have a drill, and you can still turn it into an external, internal cue. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, throwing from the knees is much different from throwing from the knees, focus on your lower body, right? Doing the 10 toes drill, and this is another thing, the athletes could, and this is why you have to be alive as a coach, the 10 toes drill with no, 10 toes, is that what you call it? Yeah.
10 toes, yeah.
You could give no external, internal cue, right? You could give nothing, but they know what that drill is for. They already have external, internal cues attached to that certain drill. Wall marches, A-skips, these certain things, the athletes already have these drills, so regardless of if you're giving them just to generally give it to them, they already think they know what you're trying to focus on, and then it turns into this internal, external cue battle for them, and they start to freeze up, have degrees of motion, and like you said, start to get domed up on pieces. Not that internal, external cues are always bad, but you do have an athlete that is in their head on that certain drill, they already know it. So that's again, where it comes to being a really good coach or comes to being an alive coach is you need to find a drill that is the 10 toes drill that they don't know. Like it's basically the same exact drill, but with slight variations. Yeah. And that is the funny thing for a lot of athletes. It's like, that's the same fucking drill, dude. We're doing the same exact thing, but now it's an 11 toes drill. You have no idea what the fuck. It's just a tiny difference, but now you don't have biases attached to it from previous coaches and previous ideas, so then you can not be domed up when you're doing the drill. So I think that's a really good piece, because baseball, I'm sure, has 15 drills that everybody kind of does. At least, like certain drills. So it's like,
good point.
Regardless of if it's constraint-based or not, it's like they already know what we're supposed to be looking for there.
Yeah, no, definitely. It was 10 toes was funny because that's one of them that like everybody does at a young age, because you say like keep your feet like in cement and like don't move them, but then you progress to like now I'm allowing myself to like move, load and coil that front hip and like load in that back hip, and it's much more rotational as rather to like just being like kind of robotic and linear. Like you want to be much more rotational now. So that's a good point. Like last year I kind of learned how to do that one. Shift your hips a little bit, that changes the whole
same drill.
Okay.
Yeah,
shift your hips. Okay, now I feel like I can load and be like powerful as opposed to like straight, and then you want to be linear because everything's pointing there. So that's a really good point. And you have to be able to notice that and be like, okay, this is not what we're trying to do here, regardless of what you've worked on before. Like, here, try to just shift that or put your foot there or whatever to change the display of the change the setting.
Yeah, and even something there, dude, it's like you do the 10 toes drill, then put a football in their hands and tell them to throw the football as far as possible in that 10 toe drill setting, and you're going to get the same type of result, because it's like you're not going to linearly throw a football as far as possible. No. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to happen. But if your goal is to throw it and you put 3 guys that are actually competing against each other, throwing a football, like they're going to naturally start to get to that fucking hip shift where they're rotating and going through, because they have to be able to compete, which I think is one of the beautiful pieces of, again, having training partners, but getting out of the athlete's traditional biases. But I think, again, a lot of coaches are against that. Like, they're against slight tweaks, and maybe not even against, but again, I just think it's funny that the constraint-led model is labeled as the lazy model, and like most coaches are being lazy with their pre-programmed drills that they already have, and they would never put a football in their hand. They would never put a different weighted ball. They would never have something in the other hand for that athlete to kind of think about. Like, they're not alive in their sessions. Like, I feel like that is lazy session. But we kind of went on some rants there. Did you have anything else in the presentation?
No, but that's kind of it. I wanted to just, I can add a little bit too. I feel like we don't do those different drills or different things because we do drills to create adaptations. Like, we ultimately do them to get a result in the actual throw or the actual swing or whatever you're trying to work on. But then we don't. It's like training. It's like let me finish my train of thought here. But then we don't push them enough to create that adaptation. So if you're looking to increase your bench, but you always bench one plate, it won't increase your bench really, unless you're benching for 30 reps. But then it's the same thing. If you're looking to clean up your lower half, or you're looking to clean up something doing X drill, but you never throw hard out of it, or you never swing hard, or you always do, like, it doesn't transfer. So I feel like that's what a lot of coaches get caught into, especially at a young age. Like, you'll put kids, it's always you start practice, one knee, then you're facing, then you whatever, face, feet, like whatever. It's always the same thing. But you never go past 40 feet, 60 feet, 70 feet. So everybody's throwing like lightly. But then the real benefit is when, all right, let's do a 10 toes drill and throw as hard as we can. And now you're like, oh, now I'm feeling something. Like, this is how I need to. And then you get all those adaptations that are the ones that you want. Like, oh, okay, he's going to organize himself to actually throw hard. And it's like, yeah, that's what you got to do every time you're throwing. And that's why I'm throwing on my knees right now a lot, and that's why I'm throwing 10 toes a lot and catcher a lot, and I'm trying to, and I'm throwing hard out of these positions because I'm like, this is what I want. Like, I want my body to organize like this, so then when I get with the real baseball, it's like, oh, I can find like the correlation and see like how I actually can move to throw harder.
100%. I mean, you see that all the time in the weight room too. It's like the difference between, like, you can make a squat and you can make a bench and you can make an Olympic lift look super clean at 20% of your max, but that's not really telling me what your technique actually looks like. And I think a lot of coaches, and that's not to say there's never a time for that. I think, especially in drills, like, I think maybe like, let's say 5 to 10% of your time can be a feel-based drill. Just feel something, be rhythmic, be fluid, especially if you have a locked-up athlete. Like, maybe that is the goal. It's just like, okay, we're being rhythmic with this throw at 50% and then 60, 70. But again, eventually you want to work up, okay, I want to throw far and relax. I want to do the Olympic lifts. I want to be relaxed, but I also want to lift a lot of heavy weight. Like, it doesn't do me any good to be. I can be relaxed with 10 pounds on the bar. Like, that's not the goal. That's like you were saying, and it turns into a lot of different like motor patterns when you're watching it too. Like, from a 50% to a 70%. Like, there's a big difference between those. And I was talking about this yesterday on the YouTube that I made. Is why I think that's why there's a big benefit in increasing your max threshold to things, because then your old 100%, let's say you take your 100% to 110%, right? So let's just say it's a baseball, you're throwing 100 miles an hour, you take it to 110, right? Your old 80% now is your new 70%, right? So now you are able to throw a little bit more relaxed at a lesser volume. Then same with swings. It's like you can swing nice and relaxed and put the ball exactly where you want, but again, it's not hit hard enough for it to fucking matter. Like guys are just gonna snap that shit off. But if you can increase your max exit velo 10%, then that old 70% swing is now your new 80% swing. Or it's like 80% for other people, right? So it's much faster, much more explosive, but at much less effort, and you can be fluid and rhythmic with it too. Yeah. So I think there's a degree to that, but again, you can't get there without ever. You have to throw hard, you have to hit hard, you have to try and do it with the drills. Like, again, I see it a lot in hitting too. It's like the drills that you're talking about. It's like, okay, the swing looks good, but you're hitting the ball 40 miles an hour, dude. Like, and again, I get there is a balance.
There's a time and place.
There's time and place for like feeling things, but then like once you feel it, okay, can you feel it at 50? Can you feel it at 60?
Yeah.
Can you feel it at 70? But eventually we want to feel it all the way at 100, or it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't have to be all in one session. Like, it can be a progression, but yeah, like ultimately you want to get to a point where you get to a result that you were trying to engender doing those drills, because if you
engender, good word, dude. Yeah, that was nice.
It's because of my French, dude. Sometimes I have some weird words. Sometimes I can't think of the most basic fucking word, but then I have a translation from French.
That was
like
good.
Engender, yeah.
Bam. Anything else? Sorry, I didn't mean to take you out of his train of thought. That was good.
That's what I was saying, but yeah, you need to keep going with the progression and follow through so that you actually get the result that you want, and not do something like just for the sake of doing it. Like, have a purpose.
Yeah, just not wasting time.
Yeah.
Fuck yeah, dude. Anything else?
Whole thing.
That was pretty good. That was a good combo. Next week, what are you covering? What are your thoughts?
I'm not sure yet. I liked what you posted about Nietzsche's thing on your Instagram post. So I might want to do something more philosophy-wise.
Ooh, look at you. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
And then next week, he's gonna program his first JSD game. So we got that next week. We'll go over programming probably this week and just kind of talk about what we're looking at. I'll show you our whole philosophy, but that'll be the next step. And then, yeah, you got like 19 pages of paperwork to fill up for your internship.
Yeah, I do have that.
Every 2 weeks, bro. It's the most wild thing ever. It's like, what did you learn every single day? It's like, Jesus Christ, bro. What are you trying to learn every day? Like, I've never been at an internship where I've learned that much.
Well, I'm learning. I am learning. I'm learning so much.
Every month, he has to fill out a whole paragraph.
Yep, I did.
What'd you learn today?
I learned how to do that. A clap pull up.
Clap pull up.
Clap pull up. I learned.
Was that your first clap pull up?
Yeah, I think we
Yeah,
could say at
nice.
least more than one in a row.
Nice.
I knew I could do them. I just had never done them, so that was cool. And yeah, that's that conversation. I learned that you could do an interview with only one mic if you're missing the other one.
Nice.
That's also an efficient way to do it.
And you got a wedding this weekend.
Yeah, I did.
Nice.
Wedding.
All right.
It's gonna be fun.
Thank you guys for watching. We'll be back for week 3.
All right.
Let's do it.